Let me tell you something that might sting at first, but will save your soul. In the end, living alone isn't loneliness, it's liberation. And some relationships are far more isolating than any empty room could ever be. Now hear me clearly. There comes a moment in your life when the silence of your own space feels sweeter than the noise of someone who doesn't value you. Living alone doesn't mean you failed at love. It means you finally stopped begging for the scraps of someone else's attention. It means you realized you don't need to shrink, twist, or fracture parts of yourself just to keep a connection alive. Living alone beats any relationship where you walk on eggshells. It beats any relationship where your needs are mocked, minimized, or ignored. It beats any relationship where you're present, but the other person is emotionally absent. Because here's the truth, we rarely say out loud, loneliness inside a relationship wounds deeper than loneliness in an empty home. When you live alone, you reclaim your breath, you reclaim your mornings, you reclaim your peace, you reclaim the parts of yourself that got buried under compromise, fear, and self-abandonment. When you live alone, you learn to listen to your own heartbeat again. You discover that solitude isn't a punishment. It's a reset. It's the first time in a long time the world stops telling you who to be, and you start remembering who you actually are. So let's dive into why solitude becomes strength and why some relationships only survive because you stopped listening to yourself. When I say living alone beats any relationship, I'm not talking about running away from people. I'm talking about running back to yourself. There is a kind of aloneness that doesn't feel empty. It feels sacred. It feels like stepping into a room where the air finally matches your breath, where nothing is pretending, nothing is loud, nothing is demanding you to be less, so someone else can feel more. You know what I learned? Some relationships don't break, they slowly suffocate you. And the tragedy is you don't even notice it happening. You start giving up tiny pieces of yourself, your boundaries, your voice, your joy, your rest, until you look in the mirror one day and realize you become a visitor in your own life. You're in a relationship, yet you feel unseen. You're physically together, yet emotionally abandoned. That right there is the most painful loneliness a human can taste. Living alone breaks that spell. It's the moment you stop settling for someone whose love comes with conditions. It's the moment you realize you'd rather eat dinner at a quiet table for one than share a table with someone who never truly sees you. It's the moment you discover that peace, real, undiluted peace, is worth more than any relationship title. Living alone becomes the space where you rebuild your identity, where you grow without restriction, where you breathe without fear, where you feel without apologizing, and you start asking yourself the question you avoided for years: why was I holding on to someone who never held me back? There's a moment, a quiet, almost invisible moment, when you hear your own spirit whisper, you deserve more than this. And that whisper is what living alone gives room to grow. When you're constantly surrounded by someone who drains you, distracts you, or dismisses you, you can't hear that voice. But in solitude, it becomes thunder. Living alone teaches you the truth about your own capacity. You begin to realize you're stronger than you thought, more capable than you believed, and more whole than anyone ever gave you credit for. You learn that you can carry your own groceries, fix your own problems, comfort your own heart, and build a life that makes sense to you, not a life shaped around someone else's comfort. And let me tell you, that realization is powerful. It breaks the illusion that you need someone to validate your existence. It dissolves the fear that being alone is some kind of failure. It replaces desperation with dignity. You stop tolerating the half-love, the half-attention, the half-effort that once felt better than nothing. You stop craving apologies that never come. You stop begging for affection as if it's charity. Instead, you start practicing something terrifyingly beautiful, self-respect. Living alone becomes the classroom where you learn your emotional language. You understand what hurts you, what inspires you, what drains you, what you are no longer willing to carry. And once you see yourself clearly, once you feel that inner strength rising, stepping back into a draining relationship feels impossible. Because you finally understand this truth. Being alone isn't the fear, losing yourself is. Here's something most people won't admit out loud. Sometimes the most painful part of a relationship isn't the conflict, it's the silence. That heavy, suffocating silence where you're lying next to someone who feels 1,000 miles away, where you're sharing a home, a bed, a life but not a heartbeat. And that silence, it eats you from the inside out. Living alone breaks that silence in the most unexpected way. You walk into your own space, and suddenly the quiet feels different. It's not cold, it's not punishing, it's not filled with tension or emotional guessing games. Instead, it feels like clarity, like finally being able to breathe without waiting for someone's mood to determine the weather in your home. You start noticing things you forgot you loved, the sound of your own laughter, the way sunlight feels on your skin, the peace of waking up without anxiety pulsing through your chest. Living alone removes the emotional noise so you can hear what's real again. And here's the radical truth. Some relationships fail not because you didn't try, but because you tried to love someone who wasn't willing to grow. You tried to communicate with someone who refused to listen. You tried to fix what you didn't break. Living alone teaches you that love shouldn't feel like a battlefield where your heart is always the casualty. It shouldn't feel like a negotiation where you bargain for the bare minimum. It shouldn't feel like a constant effort to be enough. In solitude, you relearn the rhythm of your own life. You walk lighter, you breathe deeper, you feel safer. And for the first time in a long time, you whisper to yourself, "This peace, I earned it." When you finally step into your own space, something shifts inside you. It's not instant, but it's undeniable. At first, living alone feels strange. The quiet feels louder, the rooms feel bigger, and your thoughts have more space to echo. But slowly, almost gently, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time: ownership. Ownership of your emotions, your energy, your time, your life. You begin to understand that being alone is not an absence, it's an environment. It's where your soul stops bracing for impact. It's where your nervous system stops living in survival mode. It's where your heart stops waiting for someone else's approval to feel safe. Living alone becomes the space where you recover from emotional depletion. You sleep deeper. You breathe steadier. You think clearer. You feel lighter. Because you're no longer negotiating your existence with someone who couldn't meet you where you are. And here's the part most people never admit. Some relationships exhaust you more than loneliness ever will. You carry their moods like weights. You walk on emotional tightropes. You water them while you're wilting. You defend them while you're breaking. And the saddest part, you call that love. But living alone teaches you a new kind of love, the kind that comes from stability instead of fear, clarity instead of confusion, and strength instead of desperation. You start to see that peace is not boring. Stability is not weak. Solitude is not empty. It is the foundation of every healthy relationship you will ever build, especially the one you build with yourself. There's a specific kind of healing that only happens when you're alone, a healing that requires space, silence, and honesty. When you live alone, you no longer have someone's voice overpowering your own. You no longer have their opinions drowning out your intuition. You no longer have their emotional storms disguising themselves as your responsibility. You finally have the room to ask yourself the questions you avoided for years. What do I actually want? What do I genuinely feel? Who am I when I'm not bending? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're liberating. Living alone exposes the truth that you were overextending, over-explaining, over-loving, and overcompensating. And in that truth, you discover something sacred. You were never hard to love. You were just loving the wrong person. Solitude becomes a mirror. It shows you where you abandoned yourself, where you silenced yourself, where you settled for less than you deserved because you were afraid of losing someone who had already lost interest. But in that mirror, you also see your strength, your ability to rebuild, your capacity for self-respect, your quiet resilience. You start unlearning the belief that you need someone to validate your worth. You realize you were whole before they came, and you will be whole long after they're gone. And the more you grow in that space, the more you realize something powerful. You weren't afraid of being alone. You were afraid of facing yourself. And now, you're finally brave enough to meet your own reflection. One of the most beautiful things about living alone is how your standards rise without you even trying. When you're no longer absorbing someone else's chaos, your mind becomes clearer. Your heart becomes steadier. Your intuition becomes louder. And suddenly, you can see the difference between attention and affection, between comfort and connection, between someone liking you and someone truly valuing you. You begin to recognize the subtle ways you once betrayed yourself just to keep someone close. How you apologized for emotions you had every right to feel. How you dimmed your light so they wouldn't feel small. How you accepted inconsistency and called it patience. How you carried their insecurities as if they were your responsibility. But now, in your own space, you relearn the language of your worth. Living alone redefines what you're willing to tolerate. You stop entertaining relationships that drain your emotional bank. You stop giving free access to people who never earned a key to your heart. You stop trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. Your boundaries shift from being optional to being non-negotiable. And the most powerful part, you learn that solitude doesn't leave you empty. It leaves you selective. Selective about who you let in. Selective about what energy you allow near your peace. Selective about what kind of love you accept. Because once you've tasted a life that's peaceful, you'll never tolerate a relationship that's painful. You finally understand this truth. You don't fear being alone anymore. You fear losing the peace you fought so hard to build. There comes a point in your solitude where something shifts, not in the world around you, but inside you. You wake up one morning and realize you're no longer simply living alone. You're living aligned. Your life starts matching your values. Your choices reflect your truth. Your space becomes a sanctuary instead of a hiding place. And that's when it hits you, you're not lonely. You're becoming you again. Living alone gives you the freedom to rebuild your routines in ways that honor your soul. You start creating mornings that feel gentle and nights that feel peaceful. You start choosing rest over chaos, clarity over confusion, and growth over attachment. You begin to understand that your home is not just four walls. It is the container for your healing. You discover parts of yourself that were silenced in the wrong relationship, your creativity, your humor, your ambition, your softness. You find joy in your own company, strength in your own presence, and comfort in the quiet stability of your space. And here's the part that surprises most people. Solitude makes you more emotionally available, not less. More loving, not colder. More open-hearted, not guarded. Because you've learned what it feels like to be safe within yourself. You've learned that love without safety is not love. It's survival. You've learned that connection without respect is not intimacy, it's dependency. Living alone teaches you to approach relationships not from hunger, but from wholeness. Not from fear, but from clarity. Not from emptiness, but from abundance. And once you feel that kind of alignment, you stop chasing people who disrupt your peace,